fighting against cybercrime. It's within the mandate of the Council of Europe. It's because it's a transversal and transnational issues, in the sense that it impacts not only, let's say, crime in general, like cybercrime, like different offenses committed, but other areas from the online environment, but also in general in the society, because we are talking about election interference, and we see that cybercrime could be behind.
You're going to protect your customers, that's fine. You're going to issue some reports or some other types of data telling people, okay, that's the infrastructure, stay away from it or something like that. But without the authority and the public sector, you cannot do any more than that.
This takes time to build this kind of trust, to bring the trust at this level.
All right, welcome to today's episode of Cybercrime from the Frontline, where we're talking about delivering on the promise of collective defense. And this is something that is often overlooked in cybersecurity, but the unified forces of a public-private partnership can be a force multiplier. So excited to have you here for season 3 of Cybercrime from the Frontline. My name is Bruce Sussman. I'll be your host for today's podcast episode, and I'm here in the Bitdefender studio with two experts who are from both sides, the private side and the public side. And I know you've worked together as well. So great to have both of you. And let's start by asking you to introduce yourself. And Catalin, as you do, would you also kind of explain a little bit about how long you've been involved in public and private partnerships and working on this?
All right, so my name is Catalin Cosoi. I'm the Chief Security Strategist for Bitdefender, and I've been with the company for the past 21 years, which practically makes me a little dinosaur around the surroundings. Yes, and I've been working in this, cooperating with the public sector and also with other private organizations. I guess this goes back into 2012. This is the moment I realized that as a private company, you can only do so much. Of course, you can protect your customers, but if you want to go into the field of fighting cybercrime, you need the authority and the jurisdiction that law enforcement has to put on the table. Incredible.
And by the way, just because you have that much experience, it doesn't make you old, just highly qualified. So that's all. It's a no dinosaur.
And crunchy.
Sometimes that can happen, exactly. All right, great to have you. Thank you. And Virgil, welcome to the podcast. Would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Virgil Spiridon. I'm the head of the Cybercrime Programme Office of the Council of Europe, which is based in Bucharest, Romania, and responsible for capacity building on cybercrime. With a global mandate to assist countries worldwide to strengthen capacities of the criminal justice authorities to fight against cybercrime and to handle electronic evidence. My previous experience is with the Romanian police, where I used to work for more than 25 years. Cybercrime, organized crime. I used to be the first head of the cybercrime unit from Romanian National Police. Then I went up to the deputy director of the organized crime, and then deputy chief of the Romanian National Police.
Excellent. Well, it's fantastic to have you, and a lot of experience, obviously, in the room. And before we dive into the topic at hand, I think some background information could be helpful. And first of all, I was thinking about the Council of Europe versus the European Union, and sometimes there can be some confusion over that. Would you explain the Council of Europe and why it or you are involved in fighting cybercrime?
Indeed, it's a very good question, because sometimes it happens that people might not be necessarily familiar with the differences and know how to figure out what is the difference. Council of Europe, European Council, European Commission, and so on. Council of Europe is an European organization which was established in 1949 by 10 countries. Now it has 46 members, also outside the European Union. And it's an organization that was established with the aim to promote human rights, rule of law and democracy. Fighting against cybercrime. It's within the mandate of the Council of Europe. It's because it's a transversal and transnational issues. In the sense that it impacts not only, let's say, crime in general, like cybercrime, like different offenses committed, but other areas from the online environment, but also in general in the society, because we are talking about election interference, and we see that cybercrime could be behind. And or we are talking about, I don't know, investigating terrorism attacks, and then we see the need for electronic evidence. When it comes to our action, and I'm talking in general now about the Council of Europe, we have a mandate to engage with any country in the world. I said that it's an European organization, but the impact is global, not only because of the membership of the Council of Europe, but because of the mandate, because of the actions of the Council of Europe. So cybercrime, we tackle cybercrime from three perspectives. First is with trying to put on the table legislation, legal framework, international legal framework for fighting against cybercrime, for countries to follow, for countries to implement at the national level and make use whenever is necessary to conduct investigations, prosecutions, but in the same time to conduct international cooperation. So we are focusing on criminal justice authorities. And as I said, with the legal framework, this is the first pylon. Secondly is the committee of the convention, because for the legislation we have the so-called Budapest Convention, the first instrument, the first treaty on cybercrime, and the most relevant, because now there is also another one which was developed at the UN level, but it's still at the beginning. It's only signed, it's not in place. And the third pillar is with capacity building. That's because a few years ago, in the discussions, in the context at the UN, some meetings on cybercrime, it was discussing what can be done more at the global level to support countries, right? Legislation, of course, there is legislation, can be improved, can be enhanced, but what to do more for the countries? Because we see different levels in different regions, in different countries, capacities, legislation, instruments, and so on and so forth. And the answer was capacity building. And the Council of Europe took the lead on that and developed this office in Bucharest, Cybercrime Programme Office, which is a unique initiative at the international level to support countries in developing their capacities to fight against cybercrime.
Incredible. Okay, thank you for that background. And you mentioned the Budapest Convention. And so my understanding, Catalin, of the Budapest Convention is this is like established some of the norms for how we work with other countries on fighting cybercrime. Is that right?
Virgil can tackle that question a lot better. But yes, when you fight cybercrime, and it's 2026, you'd believe that there are so many instruments that you can apply for international cooperation, for legislation, and how to tackle particular types of threats and how to investigate them. But in reality, things are that starting with the Budapest Convention, but also other instruments that have been developed, this allows you as an investigator, but also as a private sector, to reach out to a company which is in a different jurisdiction, a different country, to ask them the right questions and to provide them, they can provide you the right answers. Like I said, Virgil can.
Yeah, happy to develop a bit further on the Budapest Convention. It has been drafted 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, actually, because this year will be the celebration, 25th celebration of the Budapest Convention, entered into force in 2001, and it was signed in Budapest. That's why it's called Budapest Convention.
I was wondering.
This is the practice at the international level, to name the convention based on the places where they sign. It depends, right? But why it's important, as I said, it's the first instrument that was drafted at the international level to provide legal framework for the fight against cybercrime. And here we have provisions on substantive part, like offenses, right? Procedural powers, with powers for the authorities to investigate, prosecute cybercrime, but not only. And this is the beauty of the Budapest Convention, that is relevant not only for cybercrime, but also for other crime areas. I mentioned before about investigating terrorism, could be other offenses, because when it comes to electronic evidence and international cooperation, with the third chapter of the Budapest Convention, there are instruments for making use of them when conducting investigation prosecution. So it's a criminal justice treaty and provides tools for law enforcement and to fight against cybercrime. Yeah, there is a new UN treaty, if that it's also relevant for people to know, that was actually developed in the last years, and now it has been open for signature last October in Hanoi, in Vietnam. But what I want to say about this is that they are complementary, so they complement each other. And the UN treaty is actually got inspired from the Budapest Convention, because everything what was put in the Budapest Convention, what was drafted 25 years ago, is still valid. The only challenge, but yeah, we can talk further also about that. The only challenge when it comes to legislation at the international level is to get quickly access to data from other jurisdictions. Not necessarily the need for other offenses, because pretty much everything is covered, but what exists at the international level, and of course in the national legislations.
Okay, yeah.
Well, you have to figure out a bit throughout the past 25 years. There were emerging countries where, for instance, let's talk about the cybercriminality was growing or evolving, or just in other countries just beginning, right? There weren't too much cyber attacks, and once they started to show up, the country had the need to adapt the legislation or create the correct legislation to prosecute those types of crimes. And the idea was that they were like, hey, look at the Budapest Convention, adopt it, and you'll have everything in there.
Wow, that is incredible, and it's powerful.
Yes,
I mean, that's critical.
It's powerful, and just to complement also on the impact of the Budapest Convention and the outreach. So with the membership, just to give you an idea, it's like 97 countries engaged with the Budapest Convention at the international level. So 81 full parties, countries that are have the legislation fully aligned in compliance with the Budapest Convention, and 16 that are in the process of acceding. So like a bit less than half of the UN members states.
So there's still room.
Yes, there is still room for improvement indeed, yeah. But there are also other countries that have legislation aligned, but it's also a political decision, to accede to a convention. So because we've been engaged with more than 97 countries, right? Those that have the legislation and pretty much in line with the Budapest Convention in capacity building. So we've been engaged since the office has been established, in the Budapest Convention has been put in place with more than 140 countries. And just to give you an idea, in the last 12 years, because in April we will celebrate 12 years since the Cybercrime Programme Office has been established here in Romania, and we did in these 12 years like 2,700 activities, capacity building activities. Wow. Worldwide. So working with countries from Pacific to Europe to Africa, Asia, Caribbean, Latin America, so all regions.
That's great. That is really incredible. That's fantastic. Okay, so what I'm excited about that you have said so far is this kind of Budapest Convention, now the UN, we've level set some norms for how we can operate and go after cyber criminals across jurisdictions. So that kind of leads us to the topic at hand today, which is unlocking the promise of collective defense, right, of public-private partnerships. And I suppose that could mean different things to different people. So I think it would be helpful for our viewers and our listeners to hear how you're thinking of public-private partnerships. And I would like each of you to share a little bit about that and put yourself in this position. Let's say, Catalin, you're out to dinner, you're at a cafe, you're enjoying some Romanian wine, let's say, because we know it's delicious.
Sounds good.
Yeah, exactly. You're on board. Okay, good. And you're talking with a friend and you're saying, I'm involved in this public-private partnership around cybercrime. And your friend says, what exactly is that? So how would you explain it?
Okay, so as I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, I realized many years ago that if you want to put a dent in cybercriminality, you cannot do it by yourself as a private company. For instance, look at us, Bitdefender. We are a cybersecurity company with a global audience around the world. But when we're investigating a particular case, let's take, for example, a ransomware scenario, a ransomware attack, where you do have people, the cybercriminals behind the ransomware attack, which basically are spread around the world. They're rarely in the same country. So they cooperate together and they have well-known infrastructure in various parts of the world. Okay. What can I do from a technical perspective is that I can look at the case, look at the malware, I can look and maybe map the infrastructure, and I can build a list saying, okay, these are the IPs of the servers that are involved in here. This is how they work. This is the modus operandi. Maybe if we're also talking about modern ransomware, which is not only just encrypting data, but also publishing it, trying to extort the victim to pay in order not to be published, you get quite a big chunk of infrastructure that you can map down around the planet. Okay, what's the next level? As a private sector, you cannot really do much more than that. Sure, you're going to protect your customers. That's fine. You're going to issue some reports or some other types of data telling people, okay, that's the infrastructure, stay away from it or something like that. But without the authority and the public sector, you cannot do any more than that. If you have partnerships with the law enforcement community or other organizations like Europol or Interpol, they can go to the next level. They can check if they have open cases, if they have complaints from the victims, and then they have the authority and the jurisdiction to go where those servers are located, create images, investigate who's building them, who's owning them, and maybe then further they can actually arrest the individuals behind the attack. And in some cases, return the stolen money.
We hope for that, but that is a great explanation. Very easy to understand. Thank you. Okay, now, Virgil, do you agree, or how do you describe it to your friends if somebody's asking?
I fully agree. Just
during the wine, don't forget that.
Okay, starting with the wine. I fully agree, starting with the wine. It's just to bring a bit a different perspective to the table, because from my previous experience also with the police and also in the current capacity, we work very much with the private sector. For cybercrime, I think private sector, international cooperation and private sector are like, essentials for fighting against cybercrime, given the nature of the cybercrime, right? Transnational nature. My experience is that when it comes to cooperation between authorities and private sector, so the best one will be when you see them working together, sharing data, working together, supporting each other and different activities. But this needs to start with real understanding of each other's responsibilities, roles, scope, and so on. Because private sector, the scope is to make money, right? Business, which is fair, right? Mm-hmm. For law enforcement is to go after the criminal, prevention, identify what is behind criminal activities. And for that, there is a need for what? There is a need for information from private sector. There is a need for knowledge that the law enforcement might not possess. So also from private sector. And it depends also on the understanding. I'm talking now more about the law enforcement. Understanding on the need to get support from private sector, right? Once this is there, then it's easy to build up a real partnership, because partnership for me means not things done on ad hoc basis, that are done rather on like a continuous process, and supporting like a partnership, like a memorandum, like a framework for cooperation. But that depends also on the country, on the culture from that country to work private sector, public authorities, and again, people with skills to build this trust, to build this community, to build this partnership. So this is essential. Of course, resources, it is necessary. Not only human resources when people with the right skills, but also financial resources too, because it's not just having personal contacts, like I said before, and also doing ad hoc things on ad hoc basis. So it's relevant, it's important. It depends on the people, and it's based on trust and willingness of both sides to work together.
Yeah, trust is the main ingredient here, because if you have you obviously have to have some paper trail somehow. Memorandum of understanding, that's one thing, some other type of contracts. But at the end of the day is the trust between the people that work together. For instance, if a person that was involved in many cases, if he has to, I don't know, step down or move to something else and is being replaced by a new person, usually things don't run as smooth as initially. So it will take some time to build the trust again. Okay, there is this trust at the level of the institutions, that's fine, but still the individual needs to be accepted by the group. And also, to give you an example about the perspectives from public and private, 10 years ago, I was in Singapore at the Interpol headquarters there, and it was a room filled with police officers from around the world and members of the private sector. And the question that we all had to answer was 10 years ago, so let's remember that, was, okay, which is the most important threat right now? All the members of the private sector said ransomware. Almost all members of the public sector said business email compromise. Why? Because we had telemetry from our customers, and law enforcement had complaints from the victims, right? But if you put them together, you see, that's what you're working on.
That is incredible. So, I mean, that's unlocking insights for both sides.
Yeah,
right
exactly,
there.
exactly.
Yeah, okay, that must have been an unexpected moment. Okay, so that's great. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you discussing the trust and how important that is. What does a well-run, or maybe I should say well-working, public-private operation look like? I mean, when both sides are working well together, how do you know what is it like? Can you take us under the hood?
Yeah, successful examples usually happen when both sides of the party collaborate in a trustworthy manner and they exchange data, right? So for the private sector means providing telemetry, providing insights on the technicalities and so on. But also the public sector has to give something back, or usually give something back, so things can progress further. For instance, practical example, let's say I identify, to go back to the previous example with the ransomware, I identify that a particular server is hosted somewhere in the Netherlands or in Romania. Okay, in this group of people that investigate the case, then you need to involve the police from that particular country, because they have infrastructure, the criminal infrastructure is in their jurisdiction, so they have, in a way or another, they have to be involved. So they can join the consortium, and they can go, seize the machine, and perform forensic analysis on that machine, right? Now, things can stop here, right? And police takes over. Or they can share and say, this is the image. Can you all take a look at it and see your findings? Because in all the cases where both police and private sector looked at the same thing, at least once they found something that the other party didn't see, right? So working together, which will allow us to move faster and further. Now, unsuccessful operations is that you receive a question, you answer the question, and then you hear nothing back. What happened? Was it useful? Maybe it wasn't useful, that's fine. But a feedback would be, yes, it's good, or no, it's not good, we're working on it, or something. So that would be like an unsuccessful cooperation or the previous one, which was a successful cooperation.
That's great. That's great. What do you think, Virgil?
Yeah, again, I agree with Catalin on this. Just to add that he mainly referred to the cooperation on operational side, let's say on cases. But this comes after there is trust around, right? Because and this takes time to build this kind of trust, to bring the trust at this level, right? It's not necessarily about sharing data with the private sector or partners, but you have to understand that there are some legal constraints for that, right? With data privacy and so on. But we don't get into this because there are legal tools to share data. Indeed, it's what I said before. So working together, sharing data, and to get something back from law enforcement. He mentioned that this is feedback. I learned when I used to work for police, for the Romanian police, how important it is to provide feedback to the private sector. Whether, let's say, it's about a case where the private sector could be a victim of some illegal activity. It could be, right? And then they report to the law enforcement, then will be further investigations and so on. It's important to give them feedback. Look, this has been done, or we got to this point, or we might need to further investigate, or there's not much we can do because sometimes it's because of the technical issues, different jurisdictions involved, there might be limitations or not necessarily be successful, or at least in the first part. But again, the real cooperation that could take place in operational side, I see a huge value for that, because there is knowledge in the private sector. They have resources, they have tools. And for the police, it's just to find the right legal instruments to set this framework for cooperation, and indeed to be transparent, to make sure that all the standards, legal standards, are followed, and to work together. But in complex cases, in complex investigations, it's very rare when you can succeed without support from the private sector.
Wow. So I feel like what both of you are describing, it's almost like here's the private, here's the public, and when you put them together, it's that force multiplier.
So you got the full circle.
I mean, that is incredible. So, all right, so that's great, and I appreciate you hitting on those themes. One question I have is for those who might be watching to say, I think I would value something like this, but I've actually heard CISOs say, I'm a little concerned, like what happens if I get involved with law enforcement or, strike up one of these partnerships? What does it go off the rails? What happens? So, Catalin, I know you've heard talk about this as well and addressed it.
Yes, and it pretty much depends on which side you are. You are the victim yourself, your organization, or you have, other people are the victims and you just want to help out, right? Okay, in the first scenario where you are the victim, yes, I know CISOs or other types of jobs in the organization are reluctant to working with law enforcement because, yes, they've seen the Hollywood movies when LEAs come in and take all your infrastructure, and you're like, okay, so how am I putting back the business? Right? How do I recover from this? I was a victim once, and now I'm a victim twice, right? So what they need to understand is that police or law enforcement or other organizations understand very well that your main priority is to recover from the attack and put back all the services online to accommodate the customers that you have. And we did a series on various webinars or tools. Is that what we tell them is that, look, your priority is business continuity. So what we say to you is that save backups of the artifacts that have been involved in the attack in a way that can be used in court. And there are free tools you can use. You don't have to invest anything in that. You might need some hard drives, and that's about it. And once that's on the side, then you can delete and do whatever you want to recover the business. But save those artifacts. That's what the police will need. They will do the forensics on those, and they can continue the investigation without bothering you with anything else.
And then your business continuity continues.
And your business continuity continues, and so on. Or maybe this is one example. There will be other situations when, for instance, the victim company has to negotiate with the criminal. My suggestion is that don't do that by yourself. Maybe you need to involve law enforcement even then, so they can help you out because they have expert negotiators. They're much better than your lawyer, for instance.
Right.
Right. So that's from the perspective of the victim, where you have to provide intelligence on the attack against you. Then you have to also make a complaint, so they have that on file and so on. If you are a private sector and you want to work with law enforcement to help out in general, not necessarily because you're a victim, then you can start, you can reach out to the Council of Europe, for instance. You can reach out to Europol, for instance, and Interpol, because these are huge hubs. And then they can help you out and tell you, okay, what sort of data, how do you want to get involved? Okay, now that you have that clear, they can direct you to the right institutions for further stuff. For instance, if you have very good data from, I don't know, Romania, they will direct you to the cybercrime department in Romania, and they can put you in contact. But then it's your responsibility to build the trust.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Okay, that's fantastic. I want to, just in the interest of time, I want to shift gears a little bit. And Virgil, I'll come to you first on this next question, but I want to know, when you see the results, the outcomes of these public-private partnerships, are you seeing parts of the cybercrime infrastructure or ecosystem disrupted? What kind of positive outcomes are you seeing from this working together, this collective defense?
Definitely. Definitely there is progress in the cooperation. Definitely the outcome is positive with impact, not only on less criminals, less criminal activities, but also on the businesses. Because we mentioned before about the private sector being a victim, right? It's for their also for their interest, for instance, to report, because I can understand the issue of reputation for the private sector, right? Because they might not want to be seen working with law enforcement, or not necessarily reporting something because might create some damages, reputational damages, and so on. But they need to think beyond that, because again, it's about the security of their businesses, which are taking place mostly in the online environment, right? So these I see as benefits. Then, of course, there are also other major benefits. Are also other benefits like learning for the law enforcement, learning from the knowledge of the private sector. Private sector developing their products based on the threats and what law enforcement knows about what is happening on the market, on the criminal market, let's say, so they can adjust their products. Then also for the law enforcement, they know what is happening. They know what they might need, what kind of tools, and now I'm talking, let's say, about technology, what kind of technical tools they might need, but they don't necessarily have the resources. They don't necessarily have the knowledge to develop them. Then it's when the private sector comes into play, and they can, by putting together this knowledge, they can develop tools that are useful for law enforcement, for to conduct some online investigations or to analyze some electronic evidence and so on and so forth. So these are examples. Not some concrete examples actually about how this cooperation can benefit both sides.
Catalin?
Yeah, I totally agree, and a good thing that you reminded me the last point you had, the part of the tools and the technology that are being developed. I'm not going to name it here because we don't talk about products, but we do have a product dedicated to law enforcement, and the way we built it initially, created by engineers, law enforcement was like, yeah, it's cute, but not really what I need, right? So what we did was to start to work close with them and build it together based on what they need. And it was a complete shift of what initially we thought it's required to what we build in the end. And now, since we also have AI models, large language models, and so on, you can actually put them to work. You can embed those in the technology, and you can offer to each police officer a virtual assistant to help him with the case. Obviously, respecting everything that you have to be compliant with, like you don't put evidence in the cloud, you don't share evidence with the private sector, you do it all locally and so on. But it was a complete shift from what we thought as engineers that it's required compared to what it's needed.
Wow. And so there's another example of the collective defense being stronger than one side or the other.
Exactly, bringing together the knowledge from both sides and their needs, their perspectives, which again could be different because there is different scope for each side. And since you mentioned about AI, I think this is also important to discuss because AI it's pretty much everywhere nowadays, right? And it's going to be like this for quite a while, and who knows what
the world is changing.
Exactly. Who knows what is going next after AI and so on. For the criminal justice authorities, it's also a perspective that the private sector needs to understand because it's a bit of pioneering now, a phase that trying to develop different tools. Because if you go to talk to law enforcement, they say, okay, we need AI tools. We need a knowledge on how to use AI. We need, capacities. We need to get access to tools and so on. But there is also a problem in respect to the validation of the tools, whether they are really compliant with the legal standards and validation of their products. Because otherwise, okay, you might use the AI tools. Okay, you can get some intelligence, some data, but then you end up in not being in the position to use them as evidence in criminal investigations and prosecution. So people should still have in mind that there is a need for reglementation when it comes to AI. And here the Council of Europe also managed to, together with the member states, to prepare a framework convention on AI and also methodology, Huderia methodology for assessing that the AI tools that are developed are compliant with the human rights and rule of law standards.
Yeah, well, definitely with AI, there's just a lot coming up around the corner and things we still have to iron out as, our tool ecosystem evolves along with cybercrime and fighting it and everything else. That's really great that you brought that up. I want to ask both of you, because I'm sure we have some folks watching or listening, and we're around the world. They want to maybe test the waters of a public-private partnership, but how do you get started? So what do you each recommend for beginning this? Catalin, you want to start?
Well, first you need to reach out to somebody because that's how a partnership starts to work out.
Right.
Yeah, the idea is that initially would be to do a bit of analysis what sort of data you have and how do you believe it would be relevant to fight cybercrime in general. Because, and here you might sit on data that you may not know if it's relevant or not. That it's true, but if you reach out to somebody from not only from the law enforcement community, but also to some other private partners that already have this sort of cooperation, they can tell you, yes, the data that you have can be quite vital in this sort of these types of investigations, right? Let me give you an example. You have a large database of phone numbers, very useful for an investigation, trust me. You have a lot of machines that get usually attacked. Perfect. I want to know who's attacking you because that data can also be relevant in investigation. So there are many types of data that you may have that can be useful. Once you identify that you have something to give, then you have to reach out to the law enforcement community, and I suggest you do that either through the Council of Europe or Interpol, because they sit on large, let's say, contacts databases. They know countries, they know member states. If I want to reach somebody from Morocco, for instance, I know I can reach out to them and they'll put me in contact with somebody from there. And then you start having a conversation and see where that partnership is going. And at the end of the day, it also is important to know what you want to obtain out of it, because we're not talking about money here. You're not going to sell the data. But if you work with law enforcement and you build a trust and you put a dent in cybercriminality, maybe there's an arrest, maybe not. Maybe there's some money that's being recovered or not, or just keeping customers safe. I think that's a huge win from a reputation perspective for your company, for your organization, your brand, or even for a personal branding.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. So, okay, Virgil, your thoughts on getting started, and then also just some final thoughts.
I think one size fits all does not work here, honestly. Nevertheless, there are some steps which I guess every country, every law enforcement, every authority, every public authority, again, I'm speaking on behalf of, because that is my experience, should take. So there are some steps to be taken. Because first, you need to understand the need to work with the private sector first. Secondly, is to define your scope. Why do I want to work with private sector? And we mentioned before why the reasons and the benefits and so on. And then it depends also on the country, on the region. Speaking globally now. So advanced countries, they have this culture already. Countries that start from the scratch, it might be a bit difficult. And also what is different now than, let's say, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it's the international cooperation between criminal justice authorities and, let's say, multi-international service providers. Because they are more used to work together. Okay? But to come back also to your question, I can give an example from my experience. I said before, I used to be the first head of the cybercrime unit within the Romanian police. And I started from the scratch and building the partnership with the private sector. What I did, indeed, I reached out to private sector. I said, okay, we need private sector. Who are these actors? Service providers, definitely. We need data from service providers. IT companies, they have that knowledge. We don't. We cannot afford, right? It's expensive. Okay, then IT companies, security companies, and so on. Then financial sector. We need data from financial sector. So let's reach out to them and then organize some events. Like, I don't know, start from meetings to introduce each other. Then organize some seminars or workshops, trainings together. Even so, we provided training to private sector because they are not necessarily very familiar with the legal provisions, with the legal instruments for getting access. You might experience also fights. Why I should reply to this kind of request and why you are requesting me this, but you want to have this reply by yesterday and so on. These kind of are normal, but you have to start with small steps and takes time and build a trustful relationship also with feedback and showing also results of the cooperation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you both very much for being here today, Catalin, Virgil. This was an excellent discussion, and we will put some links down in the show notes so you can check out some resources and maybe consider kicking off one of these partnerships so we can unlock the promise of this collective defense. On behalf of the entire Bitdefender team, thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Cybercrime from the Frontline, and we'll see you next time.